The spooky season is here, the perfect excuse for eating some of the unhealthiest shit imaginable, wearing the clothes that you have secretly wanted to wear all year, and going back and watching your favorite horror movies for the 50th time. I have been fascinated by the horror genre for years. It has gotten to the point that I have seen so many horror movies that I have trouble keeping all of them straight in my head. Every now and then I come across a new horror movie on Netflix that looks particularly alluring, and halfway into it I start to realize that I've seen it before and just forgot all about it. I think that's partly because I have the memory of a goldfish, but I think it's also largely due to the fact that when you've seen as many movies as I have, of any genre really, eventually none of them are going to stand out anymore. You may well be able to tell me all about the very first baseball game that you ever watched, but I don't expect any of you could tell me who won the 74th game you ever saw, nor even who played in it. After all this time, I still have a handful of favorites, though. Movies that, whether they were particularly good or not, served as important stepping stones along the way, giving me my first experiences with tropes and concepts that, while in hindsight might not be very original and may in fact be overused, were still new to me back then, and have therefore gone on to hold a lasting place in my heart over the years. I found the horror genre to be enthralling from a very young age. Being raised in a religious fundamentalist household, my family's views on horror were a bit hard to pin down. My mother a number of times made reference to 2 Timothy 1:7. For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. Now, obviously this verse is not a direct commandment, saying thou shalt not scare yourselves, but it was used in our home to make the case that doesn't deliberately scaring yourself go against the spirit of this verse? But watching horror wasn't exactly painted as being a sin, either. It was treated more like spiritual fried food. It really wasn't good for you, but I guess a little bit of it now and then isn't really going to hurt ya. I think that alone made horror movies enticing to me. They were like the forbidden fruit. They were regulated and rationed, giving me just enough to develop a taste for them, while rarely ever feeling like I had eaten my fill. My very first experience with horror came when I was, I'm not sure, I want to say about 6 or 7 maybe, when I watched The Blob, the original from the 1950s, not the remake from the 80s. And that movie fucked me up. I spent many nights after that with my face turned toward the wall, thinking about how unimaginably painful it must be to be digested alive, too scared to close my eyes and too afraid to roll over and look out over the edge of my bed, just staring at the wall and counting the minutes till morning. My parents noticed that I wasn't holding up all that well, and they made the rather fair observation that showing me that movie may have been a mistake. I probably should have waited until I was older. Of course, that made me being able to rewatch it and handle it a matter of personal pride. When are you gonna let me watch The Blob? You already did watch The Blob. You were too young to watch it. That was months ago. I've grown. Of course, I've seen The Blob since then, and it's a ball of jello. It's not exactly peak cinema. But like I said, some of these movies hold a special place in my heart for reasons that have nothing to do with how good they are. The next movie that holds a special place in my heart is Alien. I was 12 years old when I saw it. It was the first movie of that caliber that I ever saw, both in terms of the level of violence and the level of language that it contained, and its reputation definitely preceded it. My father had seen it years prior, back when it had first come out, and he had been talking about it ever since. Just every so often he would bring up how good that one Alien movie was that he caught in the theaters all those years ago. It was not the kind of movie that we would have normally allowed into our home. It probably would have never found its way under our roof at all if my dad hadn't been so taken with it and decided to make a rare exception for it. I still remember how excited I was to finally be allowed to see it, and it has remained one of my favorite horror movies to this day. The next honorable mention would have to go to The Grudge, the original American one. Not the original Japanese version, and not the one from 2020, the first of the American remakes, the one from 2004, with Sarah Michelle Gellar. My family might have been willing to bend their own rules a bit and let the rare creature feature, like Alien or The Blob, slip in under their own radar, but supernatural horror and ghost stories were not tolerated in our home at all. I was a young adult still living at home when I watched The Grudge. I snuck a DVD of the movie into my parents' house and watched it when I was the only one at home. Being my first ghost movie, along with the fact that I was doing something I wasn't supposed to do, made for quite a thrilling viewing experience that I will never forget. Last of all, I want to talk about a movie that I revisited just a few days ago, the one that gave me the idea for making this video, The Exorcist. It was one of the first, if not the first, horror movies that I watched after moving out of my parents' house when I was about 22 years old. Like Alien, this one was preceded by a lot of hype. Not so much from my family, but I had heard legends about it, about how controversial that movie was when it first came out, and how people had supposedly passed out and thrown up in the theaters. And it is another movie on the list of significant, outstanding landmarks that I encountered along the course of my horror-watching journey. The Exorcist made a big impression on me. I was fascinated and a bit traumatized by that movie. Something you need to understand about how I was raised is that I believed in spiritual warfare. My understanding was that while not every temptation or impure thought that entered one's mind was necessarily inserted there by supernatural forces, Satan did manipulate people. He could whisper thoughts and ideas into our minds, either to prod us toward individual acts of wickedness, or to strategically position us to best bring about his diabolical machinations. Even more terrifying than the possibility that Satan himself might be in the room with me Not very likely on any given day on a planet with 8 billion people. More terrifying than that was the relative likelihood at any given hour that there were demons close at hand. As embarrassing as it is to make this comparison, if you want to understand what I mean by spiritual warfare and how I viewed the world around me at that time in my life, the best demonstration I can give you would be to direct you to a chick tract called The Assignment. For me, there was no such thing as mundane occurrence or random happenstance. Has your tire ever gone flat overnight? It could be that a demon was attempting to hinder you from reaching wherever it was that you needed to be. Or perhaps it was an angel who knew that if you left on time, you would have gotten involved in an accident. Either way, whether it was demons or angels or not, however it was orchestrated, it was still, ultimately, part of God's ultimate plan for your life. Every unkind, impure thought that ever entered my mind was either a form of demonic attack, or it was simply allowed by the Lord to test me. Every bad day, every series of misfortunes, was either demons trying to weaken me spiritually, or it was an ordeal arranged for me to overcome to aid in my spiritual growth. This time of year was particularly spooky. As I've mentioned in other videos, we didn't observe mainstream Christian holidays like Christmas or Easter. We considered these holidays in their present forms to be too infused with pagan symbolism and practices. The very act of bringing a Christmas tree into our home would have been tantamount to witchcraft. But Halloween? That was straight up devil worship, a celebration of darkness and death, an invitation for evil to enter one's home. If ever there was a time when demons were about, it was then. But like I said earlier, God has not given us a spirit of fear. Are not 2 sparrows sold for a penny? Yet not one of them will fall to the ground outside of your Father's care. And even the very hairs of your head are all numbered. So don't be afraid. You are worth more than many sparrows. How could anybody be afraid of demons with the Lord as their protector? I never doubted that the Lord was more powerful than any demon, or even than the devil himself. But God was also more powerful than leukemia and pancreatic cancer. And sometimes, evidently, God just lets things happen anyway. Not because cancer and diseases are more powerful than God, obviously, but because evidently God is willing to allow them to happen. So when the Bible tells us to fear not, it is not telling you that you are safe from harm. Sometimes sparrows do fall to the ground, just never outside of the Father's will. It's telling you that whatever happens, whether the Lord keeps you safe for another day, or if the devil himself comes for you, you must take courage and submit to whatever evil should befall you, accepting it as a part of God's unknowable yet ultimately perfect plan. Maybe for some people that's enough to give them peace of mind, but for me, I was just trying to fake it till you make it, just pretending to be at peace with being the constant target of invisible supernatural entities, with being never more than a divine whim away from being rubbed out like a rabbit on the freeway. In hindsight, of course, that fear was a feature of my religion, not a bug. Religion told us that the boogeyman was real, that he was like a crouching lion seeking to devour us, and that he was right there, hiding in your closet. Then they sold us the teddy bear that was supposed to make us feel safe, the soft, cuddly little bear called Faith, who would never let the boogeyman hurt us, unless Mr. Teddy Bear decided that it was best for us and that it was a necessary part of his ultimate plan, of course. And they told us all about all of the things that the boogeyman could do to you, how he could kill your entire family and destroy your physical health and leave you wallowing alone in agony, how he could get inside people's heads and set them on a course that would ultimately end with them being tortured in ways that you can't even imagine for all of eternity. But there's no reason to worry. You've got Mr. Teddy Bear. So long as you keep him close and cherish him, he won't let anything happen to you that he doesn't want to happen to you. And that's really what matters after all, what he wants. Stop being so damn selfish. Ironically, the world became much less scary once I stopped believing in God. Once I had come to grips with the fact that the teddy bear that they had sold me was nothing but a patchwork of synthetic fabrics and polyester stuffing, I could finally start figuring out that the monster in the closet that it was protecting me from wasn't real either. The boogeyman was just the poison that they were feeding me so they could sell me the cure. And aside from the fear and the emotional damage that religion often causes, the misinformation that they spread often leads to other, more tangible consequences. For example, how many of you were aware that the 2005 horror film The Exorcism of Emily Rose was based on a true story? I expect the answer to that is at least as many of you as watched it, because the movie really wanted to make sure you were aware of that fact. What they do not make clear, and what pisses me off about this movie, is the fact that the true story is not a tale of some noble, courageous priest who put his career and his very freedom on the line to help a girl that modern science had failed. The story that inspired Emily Rose is the story of Anna Elisabeth Anneliese Michel from Klingenberg am Main, Bavaria, Germany, who died of malnutrition and dehydration at the age of 23 in 1976. In 1978, she was found in a court of law to have been the victim of negligent homicide. Michelle was epileptic, prone to seizures, and suffered from hallucinations and depression, and her parents, along with 2 Catholic priests, deprived her of all medical attention, opting to attempt to cure her through a series of exorcisms instead. They performed over 67 rituals, verbally abusing her and reinforcing her delusions over the course of several months, while she died slowly in front of them. Bear in mind, Her parents and the two priests were not determined to be responsible for her death merely because of the months of abuse and how the rituals contributed to her physical and mental decline. They were determined to be responsible because they cut her off from the medical care that might have been able to keep her alive. They watched her waste away in agony over months and deprived her of life-saving care, putting their trust in the exorcisms to the exclusion of all else. And in spite of this, in spite of the fact that they were found to be guilty of homicide, in spite of the understanding that they could have performed their rituals and gotten her the life-saving care that she needed in addition to performing these rituals, they were sentenced to nothing more than 3 years of probation. Though guilty of homicide, their crimes were trivialized as having been done with the best intentions and having been an expression of their religious liberties. Even if one were to take pity on her parents and dismiss their crimes as being the actions of mere simple-minded folks who had gotten taken in by a deadly scam, there is no excuse for administering the same level of charity to the two priests, to the representatives of the very same criminal organization that perpetrated this deadly scam in the first place. And the movie, The Exorcism of Emily Rose, celebrates this miscarriage of justice. The happy ending of the Emily Rose movie is that the good and noble priest, who in the movie was genuinely trying to help a girl who was actually possessed and whom the doctors couldn't help, is found guilty, yes, but he is only sentenced to time served. The homicide of Annalise Michel and the travesty of justice that followed took place back in the 1970s. As much as one might like to think that things have gotten better since then, they really haven't, not by much at any rate. Here's somebody you might recognize from the news. This is Pastor Greg Locke, a hate preacher from Tennessee, giving a sermon in 2022 in which he encourages people with depression to stop taking their medication and denies the existence of OCD, epilepsy, and autism, alleging that they are all just symptoms of demonic possession.
We say things like this, well, you know, I just struggle with depression. I just struggle with anxiety. I pop a few pills, things will get better. No, what you need is the gospel is what you need, praise God. We say things like this, well, I just got OCD. You know why you do things that are out of the ordinary over and over and over, and it ticks you off if it's not done? Because you have a spirit of oppression, that's why. You ain't got OCD. On 3 occasions, we're going to go through all of them, not today, thank God. On 3 occasions, kids were brought to Jesus. Not of their own will, of their own volition, but by their parents. That had epileptic fits, anger issues, outbursts of emotion. And because we've called it possession, parents refuse to deal with it. Are you telling me my kid's possessed? No, I'm telling you, your kid could be demonized and attacked, but your doctor calls it autism. I don't care if you stand or not. I don't care if you leave or not. I'm telling you, there's deliverance in the name of Jesus Christ for your children and their children's children. There's deliverance in that. Ain't no such diagnosis in the Bible. Jesus cast out that oppressing spirit, and the child was made whole that very hour, the Bible said, that very hour. That's what the Bible says.
And this sort of harmful, superstitious rhetoric has affected me on a personal level. My parents don't know about this channel, and I feel bad telling this story behind their backs on the internet. But I think it's important because it's not just our story. It's a story that I expect a lot of people have lived. Dad, Mom, I hope this video never gets back to you. I would just as soon we live the rest of our lives never discussing this part of our lives again. But on the off chance that you ever come across this video, if I get into a car crash and you end up inheriting my laptop and you find this video on it or something, I want to start this off by saying that yes, I understand that I didn't make things very easy for you and that you have your own side of the story that you could tell here. And no, I don't blame you for any of what happened, any more than I blame anyone else who has ever been lied to or fallen for a scam. We were all of us made fools of, and we were all doing what we thought was right, given the limited information that we had. I know you all did your best working with what you had to go on, and no one can say you didn't try your hardest, and a hell of a lot harder than most parents. I'm not mad at you. I'm mad at the people who knew better, and deceived all of us, including me, for so many years. I'm mad at the con men who have driven a wedge into our relationship, who have convinced you that to disagree with their bullshit is to be a hell-bound pawn of Satan, who have orchestrated a scenario in which I can't even be honest or open around you anymore without defining myself as being what you would consider to be your spiritual enemy, a servant of the devil, someone sent by the evil one to test your faith. I'm not mad at you, but the people who did this to us, fuck them all the way home. That being said, and out of the way, back when I was in my early 20s and still living at home with my parents, I suffered from severe depression. To keep it YouTube-friendly, life was a hotel, and I came pretty close to checking out early and skipping the continental breakfast a number of times. I needed help, but no help ever came. I wasn't even allowed to talk openly about what was happening to me in terms of it being a real thing. I wasn't allowed to even say that I was depressed. I was told that depression is just a politically correct term for selfishness. I was told that most mental illness was actually a form of spiritual attack, and that there must be something going on with me on a spiritual level. And I believed them. I didn't understand what was going on chemically in my brain. I just knew that I felt different than I used to, and I was having these dark, self-destructive thoughts that I wasn't used to. Where were these thoughts and feelings coming from if they weren't being whispered into my brain by a demon? How could I have fallen prey to a demonic attack unless God was allowing it, unless God had forsaken me? Which, believing that I was the target of dark powers that I couldn't hope to withstand, and that the creator of the universe had decided to withdraw his protection from me personally, that might have been the most depressing thing of all. Nobody should ever have to feel the way that I felt during those first few years of my adult life. And I'll fight like hell if it means that even one less person has to go through what I went through. Anyway, I watched The Exorcist again for the first time in a while, and it doesn't hit nearly as hard as it used to. For one thing, like I said earlier, I have seen so many horror movies now that I have trouble telling one from another anymore. They all draw from the same limited bag of tricks, and I've reached a point where I'm starting to feel like I've seen so many of them that I might as well have seen all of them. For another thing, without religion, and without the idea that demons are real and demonic possession is a thing that could actually happen, being stripped of that, the movie is just a lot sillier than I remember it being. I still had fun watching it after all these years, and I am still willing to give it credit for breaking new ground in the horror genre and doing as good a job as they did, given how old it is and how little the people who made it had to work with back then. It's just that whereas before The Exorcist used to terrify me and to live rent-free in my head, now it's memorable for entirely different reasons. Now I get to sit back and detachedly admire the achievements of the movie's practical effects while laughing at its shortcomings, and at the fact that I ever found this movie and demons scary. That's about it for this one. I hope you'll have fun this Halloween. Take it all in, appreciate the macabre imagery, and don't let the occultic symbolism or the ghoulish aesthetic take away from the fun or make you feel uneasy. God may not exist. The teddy bear may be just a teddy bear. But the good news is there's no boogeyman in the closet for him to protect you from either. There never was.